Thank you for joining the third annual Spring Financial Aid webinar series. This series is brought to you by the Northern California College Promise Coalition, or NCCPC for short. NCCPC is a collective impact coalition with over 40 members serving over 150,000 students across 12 Northern California counties. Our geographic footprint includes the 9 Bay Area counties, Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Tulare counties. We bring over 200 leaders together through committees, convenings, and working groups around 4 key pillars. Number 1, advancing public policy. Number 2, building campus partnerships. Number 3, scaling workforce pipelines. And number 4, convening communities of practice. Our members are locally and nationally recognized college access and success programs, advocacy organizations, college and neighborhood promise programs, K-12 and charter school districts, education technology nonprofits, individual advocates, and cities and mayors. We believe that working together, we can impact systemic change on behalf of all of the students we serve and beyond.
It's now my privilege to introduce today's session and our speakers. Financial aid packaging with California Community College is presented by Billy Wagner, Community College Specialist at the California Community College Chancellor's Office. And we also have Shawn Domingo, Supervisor of Financial Aid at Ohlone College. During today's session, we'll be using Padlet if we've got any questions for our presenters. I'll drop the link in the chat in just a moment. This is where we'll go for questions when we get to the Q&A portion of our presentation. You can heart a question you see to upvote that question for the speakers. And now I'll turn it over to our speakers to share their screen and introduce today's topic. Thank you both so much for being here. Over to you.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. And can everyone see that all right? All right. So before we get into the meat and bones of this, we really want to talk about how financial aid really connects to the Vision for Success goals at the California Community Colleges. And as mentioned, my name is Billy Wagner, and I am a specialist for the California Community College system. Now, the entire community college system is guided by the Vision for Success. While there are 6 specific Vision for Success goals, the point is pretty clear: to make sure students from all backgrounds succeed in reaching their goals, improving their family and communities, and eliminating achievement gaps once and for all. Efforts to achieve the goal are guided by the core beliefs that colleges should simplify paths to educational goals and help students stay on those paths. Efforts are focused on student voice and choice, universal design, and high-touch intervention, and always prioritizing continuous improvement. Now, to help us fulfill the vision goals, and the Chancellor's Office has pretty much identified 3 social determinants of educational success. Those are going to be financial stability, health and mental health, and support networks. Using the social determinants framework as a basis for student services helps clarify problems and obstacles and maximizes resources. Of course, financial aid is a vital component of the financial stability, social determinant, and maximizing financial aid awarding and packaging is just one way financial aid administrators contribute to overall student success. The work financial aid offices are doing is making such a difference in the lives of all Californians. Both Governor Newsom and President Biden's administration recognize the importance of equitable practices for distributing financial aid for student success, which has actually led to quite a few significant improvements, including simplifications to the FAFSA the free application for federal student aid, and the California Dream Act application, sometimes referred to as the CADA or CADA. Increases in the largest grant program in the nation, which is the Pell Grant, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on, and restructuring and further financing of the Cal Grant, Middle Class Scholarship, and Student Success Completion Grant programs. Now, to qualify for federal aid, a student will have to meet the following eligibility requirements. They have to be a US citizen or an eligible non-citizen. They have to have a valid social security number. They have to be enrolled or accepted for enrollment as a regular student in an eligible degree or certification program. They have to maintain SAP or satisfactory academic progress in college or career school. They have to sign the certification statement on the FAFSA, free application for federal student aid, form stating that they are not in default on federal student loans, that they do not owe money on a federal student grant, and that they will use the federal student aid only for educational purposes. And finally, they have to show that they're qualified to obtain a college or career school education by having a high school diploma or a recognized equivalent. The one that's most common is going to be the General Education Development Certificate, oftentimes referred to as the GED. To be eligible for federal, state, and institutional financial aid, a student must be a US citizen or eligible non-citizen, as mentioned earlier. And they also have to complete the free application for federal student aid, more commonly known as the FAFSA. Or if the student has no social security number or has a DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival social security number, and they meet the AB 540 status, they may qualify for state and institutional financial aid by completing a California Dream Act application. If a student is unsure if they qualify as an AB 540 student, they should really just go ahead and start the California Dream Act application, as there are some navigating type of questions that will help the student understand whether or not they meet that criteria. So I want to give you a glimpse into the different types of financial aid available at California community colleges. There are well over 40 different types of financial aid available. Many of them are listed here. I won't read them all, there's quite a few. But just know that student financial aid packages will likely consist of a mix of these different awards, which follow different eligibility criteria, most of which begins by, once again, submitting that FAFSA or California Dream Act application, and following subsequent directions provided by the Department of Education, the California Student Aid Commission, and or the Institution of Attendance. The big takeaway here, students must check their email addresses they submit with their various applications and follow the instructions that they get from those emails that are communicated from those different organizations I just mentioned. That is a huge, huge ask for all the students to do after the complete application, because that is where we see some gaps missing on some of the confirming eligibility criteria. Now, there are programs I wanted to touch on, mainly because of a huge federal and state investments that are being made. And so I wanted to call out these ones in particular. So the first one being the federal Pell Grant. It is the largest financial aid program in the country and currently offers eligible students up to $6,895. And that's per year for up to 6 years of full-time enrollment. However, the Biden administration just released their budget proposal, which would increase Pell Grant's annual award to a maximum of $8,215 per academic year. And that is nearly a 20% increase to the maximum Pell amount. Now, it's just proposed at this point, but I think that shows a huge commitment and really looking at the further cost of attendance that a lot of students are incurring. Additionally, the Cal Grant is the largest financial aid program offered by the state. And Cal Grant reform has made major strides recently, one of which is the elimination of the GPA requirement and age for students attending a California community college. Now, of course, this change is contingent upon available funding. It is actually law, but the law does stipulate that funding has to be available. But if it is implemented, It is a huge, for a lot of students that are considering exiting the system. You know, it's a huge win for them because once again, Cal Grants, as great and large of a program it is, isn't as equitable as it can be. And the steps that they're making currently, mainly the California Student Aid Commission, a lot of the partners like the Chancellor's Office for California Community Colleges, and the legislature have really made some great strides there. And lastly, the Student Success Completion Grant, which is the largest actual grant offered by the California Community College system, recently saw an increase to the max award from $4,000 to $8,000 a year. This is a massive and very welcome increase to the system. And I touch on these three because they demonstrate that the government bodies that are overseeing the state, the country, and even the institutions are pursuing substantial increases in financial aid programs to cover the cost of education while extending opportunity to those who have been historically omitted from the programs. So next, we're going to be moving on to packaging financial aid. Now, the terms awarding and packaging are often used interchangeably. In awarding and packaging documentation, awarding refers to manually offering financial aid items type at a time to a student, whereas packaging refers to awarding multiple awards at one time to create a financial aid award package for a student. Now, financial aid packaging involves employing strategies to distribute limited financial aid resources to qualified students to attend the post-secondary school of their choice. The packaging process combines various types of Title IV resources and non-Title IV aid from federal, state, and institutional entities for the most part, but it also does include private entities. And this is to help them meet the financial need of college students in a holistic sense. Rules for packaging some Title IV aid are different from the rules for packaging others, but it really shouldn't be too big of a concern for most students. It's really just kind of focusing on, once again, submitting that application and following up with any kind of emails or correspondence that you may get from your institution or any of these other governing agencies to ensure that this packaging process and awarding process can move fluent. Now, to provide a little bit of additional context, I would like to provide a summary of total financial aid package and dispersed by all 115 California Community Colleges financial aid offices. Now, please note the qualifier dispersed. It's both on the screen, and I did mention it earlier because not all package financial aid is actually dispersed. If a student decides not to attend or they choose to attend a different school, they may have not been packaged and the aid wouldn't be dispersed. So you'll notice the blue section on the pie chart displays dispersed financial aid. And that's going to be federal aid and is generally comprised of three funding sources, which include Pell Grant, which I mentioned earlier, federal work study, which is essentially like a job on or around campus, and then federal loans. And that's money that you will have to pay back if you take out. Now, generally speaking, with loans, the big thing to look at is subsidized versus unsubsidized. And subsidized loans don't start accruing interest until the student graduates or cease enrollment for 6 or plus months. And so those are the ones that we usually go like, hey, look at these first. And if you're going to accept loans, accept subsidized loans first. Now, once again, they do have to be paid back. So we always recommend to borrow wisely. And just because you're offered loans does not mean you need to accept them. It could mean that you can accept a portion of them or none of them at all. It just really depends on your needs. And then in yellow, you'll see the dispersed state aid, which is also institutional. And it's funded through programs as like the Cal Grant, which we previously mentioned, the California College Promise Grant. And that's also known as a fee waiver. Some of you may know that as the Board of Governors fee waiver from back in the day, but it's now referred to as the California College Promise Grant and various other categorical award programs. And those are going to be like CalWorks. And I mean, next up, there's quite a few out there. and they do exist for a variety of reasons. And we can touch on that a little bit later if those are interesting. And we will see a breakdown of these awards in a moment as well. Lastly, there are some privately funded aid, which is mainly scholarships and some work study programs. But it's not really something that's going to be seen on the chart because the $3.4 billion is the main part of it. And scholarships really represent a very small percentage that wouldn't even really show on this pie chart. So really, it's important to understand that most of the aid is coming from federal and state sources. Privately funded sources are great too, but it is important to know where most of the financial aid is coming. So there are 5 major types of awards as well. Those are going to be the grants, fee waivers, loans, scholarships, and work study. Now, grant scholarships and fee waivers are considered gift aid, which does not have to be paid back, while work study and loans are considered self-help since these types of aids either must be earned or repaid. As you can see in our system, the chart in front of you, the vast majority of aid is in the form of grants, followed next by fee waivers, with loans, scholarships, and work study quite a distance behind. Scholarships are actually pretty hard to see on this particular pie chart. And the last breakdown shows gifting aid. And as you can see, Pell Grant makes up the bulk of the gift aid, followed by emergency financial aid, the system aid comprised of various categorical programs, and then Cal Grant. So, here's my pup. But this summary illustrates the importance of 2 things: making sure students apply for financial aid by submitting the FAFSA or the California Agreement application. And because the financial aid can't be awarded and packaged unless students apply, and there's billions of dollars worth of gift aid available that once again do not have to be paid back. So we're going to briefly cover some terms that lead to financial aid packaging. First, COA, or cost of attendance. And this is a college's total estimated expense for 1 year, including tuition, room and board, books, supplies, transportation, loan fees, and other miscellaneous expenses. This is really a holistic idea of how much college costs for the students. Next is EFC, which is expected family contribution. This is an index number used to determine a student's eligibility for federal and federal student financial aid. This is also usually applied to the California Agreement application as well, but it just won't include the federal student aid, but it will still be referred to as expected family contribution to most students in the way that they're packaged by their college and what is provided by the California Agreement application. The EFA is the estimated financial assistance. This is a total amount of financial aid a student receives. Simply put, cost of attendance subtracted by expected family contribution equals a student's need. And need subtracted by the estimated financial assistance equals a student unmet need, which leads us to AB 28, the ban on scholarship displacement Act of 2021. This bill prohibits California community colleges from reducing students' institutional financial aid awards and offers due to private scholarships if the student's cost of attendance has not maxed out. However, as state law, it cannot trump federal law governing financial aid. For instance, as previously mentioned, a student cannot be awarded more than their cost of attendance. With that being said, if a private scholarship pushes a student past the cost of attendance, the college is encouraged to ensure that the financial aid is maximized for the student. Ways to accomplish maximizing student financial aid when a student needs a reduction of aid would be some of the following instances that I have kind of listed out for me. 1, I would suggest consulting with scholarship providers to broaden the award usage consideration to academic year, institution type, and program. So as a student, it's really important for you to understand how your scholarship currently operates and where there's some flexibility. If you can consult with the scholarship provider to split the award over multiple years, that's a fantastic resource as well, as not all scholarships are rigid. Some of them are expected to be spent in a certain way, but with careful communication with your financial aid office and with those scholarship providers, there may be some adjustments that can be made so that you can retain the full award package, just in a different way than you initially expected to. Now, you could do consultation with with your financial aid office and maybe try to apply the scholarship to another year where your cost of attendance isn't exceeded. And adjustments of institutional aid to reach cost of attendance ceilings may be something that's applied as well. And finally, it could be that a student has their private scholarship removed if the current awards that a student has within their package are more beneficial. So generally speaking, most financial aid offices are going to try to make their packages as beneficial to the student as possible. And unfortunately, if it goes past cost of attendance and there isn't flexibility with the scholarship provider, it may be in the student's best interest to remove the private scholarship in those instances. So let's take a look at some general packaging rules. 1, determine the student's cost of attendance, COA, budget, and expected family contribution, which is the EFC. Second one is to award the federal Pell Grant. The third one is to calculate the student's remaining unmet need. The fourth one is to package campus-based state, federal, and institutional funds. And fifth is to package or refer to students to supplemental sources of assistance. Now, as a student, this is the order that you should be expecting your packaging to be done, right? You're going to start with large awards and from the highest level, and it's going to go down as your need goes down as well. And colleges have the authority to package financial aid, but typically packaging follows this following sequence. 1, packaging gift aid like grants, fee waivers, and scholarships. 2, packaging self-help aid that does not place the student in debt. That's going to be like federal work study. And 3, packaging loans. It should be noted that just because a student is offered loans, as mentioned previously, does not mean that they have to accept the loans or any of it at all. They can accept a portion of it, or or they can try to see what other kind of financial aid they may be eligible to receive. But point being, a student should always borrow wisely. So now I'm going to be turning it over to Shawn, and we're going to be talking about some scenarios.
Thank you so much, Billy. All right, so we're just going to go over a few sample packagings. So this first one, we're looking at a dependent student living with their parents. Again, as Billy discussed earlier, we're looking at cost of attendance as being the primary starter of any package. Keep in mind that with federal Pell Grants, which is one of the funding that Billy discussed before, that is the base of any financial aid package if the student is a Pell Grant eligible student. So at looking at this, we are looking at this school's cost of attendance being $15,719. We can see from the student's FAFSA or CADA application that the student, well, it would be a FAFSA application because they're getting Pell. We would see that the student is a 0 EFC, which means that the student's need to attend this institution is $15,719. From that, this institution has decided to go ahead and package the student with federal Pell Grant in the amount of $64.95. The California College Promise Grant at $1,196. They've also received Cal Grant B for another $1,648. So if we go ahead and subtract those from the overall cost of attendance from the school, the student now has an unmet need of $6,380. And this is for need-based aid. So keep in mind that there's always the difference between what's need-based aid and what's non-need-based aid, and financial aid offices will determine that based on the funding source. So with the $6,380 unmet need, this student also will qualify for the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, or FSEOG. This is an additional $600 that the student would get, as well as the working opportunity, so federal work study program. So that would be another $5,000 that the student is being awarded from the institution for the work study program in order to work while they're going to school. Once we minus those additional components, the student now has a remaining need of $780. The student is fully packaged. We have not exceeded the student's cost of attendance for this institution, and they have the right to accept or reject any of their funding that has been awarded to them. And again, that's going to be based on the institution's policies and how they do their awarding and packaging. Next, please. Next sample package we're going to look at is for a student that is away or off campus. So typically for students that are away or off campus or not living at home, the cost of attendance tends to be a little higher. We know what it's like, living at home. Mom and dad will kind of front some of the stuff. When we're on our own, we're on our own. So we are looking at a total cost of attendance of $29,408 from this institution. This student's FAFSA application came in with an EFC of $2,500, which is now leaving the student with a remaining need of $26,908. From that $26,908 need, this institution has gone ahead and packaged this student with the federal Pell Grant at $4,445. And this amount, again, is based on the student's EFC that comes in. The California College Promise Grant for another $1,196, and Cal Grant B as well for $1,648. Once we've minused those awards from the student's need, we now have an unmet need of $20,019 for the student. This student is also now going to be eligible for the FSEOG grant for $600, as well as the federal work study program for another $5,000. Once we've minused those components from the student's unmet need, we now have a remaining need of $14,419. Again, we have not exceeded the cost of attendance. The student is fully packaged by the institution and may be eligible for additional scholarships that may come from outside resources. And with this, unless the student is receiving scholarships in an excess of $14,419, we really don't have to worry about scholarship displacement at this time. Next, please. All right. Second sample packaging, we're looking at away and off campus again. Again, same cost of attendance, $29,408. This student's FAFSA application came in with a little higher of an EFC of $10,500, okay, which is now leaving the student with a need of $18,908. We know that with an EFC of $10,500, the student is not going to be eligible for the federal Pell Grant award. However, the student will still qualify for the California College Promise Grant based on their need. This student is also not eligible for Cal Grant B. So once we've minused the California College Promise Grant from the overall need, we have an unmet need of $17,712. This student will qualify for work aid through the federal work study program for $5,000. As well as a direct loan that is a subsidized loan. So a need-based loan. Again, with direct subsidized loans, these are awarded to students. They are not responsible to pay back these loans the entire time they're in school and 6 months after they've graduated or drop below less than half-time or drop below half-time status. If we award that at $4,500, that now leaves the student with a remaining need of $8,212. If the student happens to receive any additional outside scholarships for any reason, we can go ahead and award those to the student without exceeding their cost of attendance. And if we do, we can always go ahead and at this point, we can send back some of the subsidized loan if the student is not tied to the loan or really wants to take out the whole $4,500. We want to go ahead and make sure we apply as much gift aid, scholarship aid to the student's account as possible, and then go ahead and maybe decrease some of their loan amounts to go ahead and limit the amount of student loan debt that the student has on them by the time that they're out of school. So we want to go ahead and definitely send back some of those loans if they're getting any additional scholarships. Now, in an example of an over award, this is a student that has a cost of attendance of $15,719. This student does have a 0 EFC from their FAFSA, which means we have 15,719 for a need. This student is Pell Grant eligible based on their EFC, so 6495. Also their California College Promise Grant for another 1196, and their Cal Grant B at 1648. Once minus, we have an unmet need of 6,380. This student does qualify for FSEOG at $600, as well as the system does package federal work study at 5,000. Okay. This remaining need is $780, and we think we're done. All of a sudden, we're notified that the student is eligible for a scholarship. So now this scholarship check has come into the financial aid office for an additional $1,000. We know that the student only had a remaining need of $780. So now that's leaving us with an over award amount of $220 that we need to go ahead and take care of to ensure that the student is still within their cost of attendance and can receive their awards. What we would do is we would go back to the aid that is not gift aid. All right. So our non-gift aid would be our federal work study program because it's earn as you work. So what we would do is go ahead and then decrease that federal work study award from 5,000 to 4,780. This would allow for us to award the student the scholarship without displacing it, as well as keep the student within their cost of attendance so that we have no over award and everything looks good for the student and they can keep all of their gift aid or any institutional aid that's been awarded. And back to you, Billy.
All right. So the last thing to mention on is compliance as it goes to financial aid packaging and then empowerment. Now, financial aid offices have to maintain pretty rigorous standards of compliance, meaning that they have to follow certain rules in order to ensure that students are financially packaged in a way that is in alignment with the Higher Education Act, oftentimes referred to as Title IV funds, because that's a title in the Higher Education Act. However, there are a lot of opportunities to utilize financial aid and make sure that students are getting the best for what they can get, right? So essentially maximizing their financial aid to the greatest extent possible. Now, there are times where, like that previous scenario Shawn was speaking about, where a student may not have some of that more self-help aid. And it's important in those circumstances to maybe speak with your college financial aid staff to ask and advocate for yourself to see if there's ways to incorporate a scholarship that you received or apply it to a different time. Additionally, there's compliance as far as like how it's administered and focused on when it's communicated to the students, but it is also pretty important for the students to empower themselves and ensure that they understand what they're being awarded and how to go about being awarded it, which a big part of that is going to, once again, start with completing, and I know I mentioned it 3 times already, but financial aid applications. It almost all starts with completing the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, and the California DREAM Act application. And then really maintaining correspondence with the different entities that are going to be communicating with you. Department of Education, California Student Aid Commission, and the institutions that you've applied to. Now, it is also important to understand that as you're looking through these communications, that there are people out doing malicious things. Really vet the emails that you receive and ensure they're coming from a viable source. Once again, those sources are typically going to be the Department of Education, the California Student Aid Commission, and the institutions, colleges that you applied to and that you sent your financial aid resources to through the applications that you filled out. But there shouldn't be anything, particularly with financial aid, that you're being requested to pay for certain things, pay to complete an application. Those are not things that the applications require. So please keep that in mind. And most of the financial aid can be managed through your state awards, can be managed through Web Grants for Students, which is a portal for students. And so if someone's reaching out to you for state-based aid and they're saying that they need certain information from you, and it seems a little fishy, you should always log into your portal, whether it be at the California Student Aid Commission, whether it be back into your FAFSA, where you can see the different printouts, or through your college portal. And then also communicate with your financial aid office as they communicate with you. It's really important that you take those steps yourself. With that being said, we are going to turn it over to questions.
First, I just want to say thank you so much to Billy and to Shawn. If folks could take one moment to use your Zoom reactions to share your appreciation, you could do the clap, you could do the celebrate, or you could post in the chat. I know that for some of us, we received these great details in the fall, but this is all just in time to support our students and families with decision time coming up. So thank you again, Billy and Shawn. As a reminder, the Padlet was dropped in the chat, so we have some time to answer some questions, and we do have a few already prepared. I'm going to start with the question that came in earlier regarding, because you talked a little bit about FAFSA and EFC and SAI and all that fun stuff. FAFSA, and there's been quite a lot of talk about FAFSA enrollment period for 2023 potentially getting delayed till as late as January 2024. Does this affect the California community colleges at all?
No. So it's important because a lot of people earmark the opening of the FAFSA application to October 1st. And it's really just a shift in when you have to complete the application. And it should also be simplified. So hopefully that really helps out too. But when that shift happens, if it's delayed, for the California community colleges, you don't have to submit your financial aid application until September 2nd. Now, it's always a best practice submit by March 2nd of the year prior to going to your college of attendance, or when you're re-upping, because you do have to do the application every single year. But September 2nd is the deadline you need to be looking at, which is 9 months away from that new opening period should it be delayed. So I would say it shouldn't be a concern outside of just general communication, making sure everyone's aware of any delay that may come about and ensuring that they're completing their application by the community college deadline or by the March 2nd deadline should they be considering any other college institution types.
Super helpful. Thank you, Billy. And a related follow-up question, excuse me, I've heard that the EFC is changing to the SAI or the Student Aid Index. Will it be calculated in the same way?
It's going to be very similar. So we've seen, so the Student Aid Index is something that should have been coming through a little bit already. So it's actually been done a year prior, but it's been delayed a little bit. Now, we have hope, I guess. We're excited about the prospects of it possibly being a part of the next cycle because it would actually make students eligible for additional funds. But the Student Aid Index is going to operate very similar to the EFC. The main difference is that the Student Aid Index can actually go into the negative. So when you have a cost of attendance for $20,000, and a Student Aid Index for a student that is particularly in need, they could have a minus $1,000 Student Aid Index, which means that they could be packaged for $21,000, even though their cost of attendance is $20,000. That's kind of a way to look at that particular scenario. And the shift in the name itself is to help with some confusion that families have. When people see expected family contribution, they take that very literally and they think, well, this is what my family is expected to bring to the table. When that's not always the case, right? It could be made up through different scholarships, loans, things of that nature, or it could be, once again, a very low amount that actually doesn't impact the student in a direct way if they're living at home or something like that. It's already being taken care of by the family. So the way to think about it is shifting that name to student aid index to better communicate what the student's looking at. And hopefully that makes sense.
And I just want to throw this out real quick. So the negative SAI, sorry, Billy, will go as low as 1,500.
Right.
Yeah, so it'll go as low as 1,500. The FAFSA application is being trimmed down from 108 questions to 37. So when Billy was talking about the simplification, that is changing as well. And they're going to be looking specifically now at less of the little intricacies on the application and more at, like Billy had stated, the income that comes into the household versus the household size. Those are two of the biggest factors that are going to be changing with the methodology. So yeah, and then there's a couple other things that are going to be taken into account now that weren't taken into account before. So it's going to be a fun time come 24-25.
It sure will. And I'm sure we'll see you all in the fall when some more information is available and you're training the field on those updates as well. Thank you for that. Another question that came in, sorry, one moment. What specific resources do you have for student parents? Do the campuses have? Do they include support for things like childcare, lactation services, things of that nature?
So that's going to usually be a college by college resource, and those are going to usually be, summed up by some of the categorical programs. So it's really important to look at the colleges that you may be attending. Shawn, I'm not sure if you could touch on your own college.
Yeah, so like Billy said, I would look at the college costs. All colleges are required to have their cost of attendance components outlined on their pages. And even with the new FAFSA simplification initiative going on, any page at that school's website that references tuition fees, anything like that, will have their cost of attendance components on them. What you want to look for is for financial aid purposes, expenses like those, dependent costs, medical expenses, that kind of stuff, that stuff is already kind of built into the FAFSA application itself when they're looking at the methodology. So we are given specific components by the Department of Ed that we are allowed to put into our cost of attendance. Those cost of attendance components are usually the tuition and fees assessed at a school, food cost, housing cost, books and supplies, personal or miscellaneous expenses, transportation, and then any other fees that the school may assess to a certain program or certain group attending, whether they're out of state, in state, international, whatever it may be. Anything outside of that would be a case where, say, there's additional expenses due to dependent childcare or other items that Mara was talking about before. Those would be examples of what we would call a professional judgment. And it's not saying that the school doesn't account for them, but there is a process that you would have to contact the school and go through the school's process of exactly what you would need to do in order for us to account for those additional expenses in the cost of attendance. Generally, schools won't have those already included. But again, it's based on a school to school. So you definitely want to check their cost of attendance components that they have listed on the website. And if they're not there, it's not saying that you can't get them, but there is a process for you to go ahead and request for them. And professional judgments is another component with the FAFSA simplification that's coming up for even the 23-24 award year, that all schools are required to make students aware of what that process is and exactly how you can go about requesting that.
Yeah, and there are a lot of services that vary campus to campus, and it is really important to look at the campuses that you're considering attending and seeing what services they provide and how impacted they are. Childcare is a great example, and it's a great one to bring up the question because the facility or the campuses that do have childcare facilities they tend to be heavily impacted. That's a huge need, not in only our system, but all the systems. And they have different criteria to meet in order to actually be able to be eligible for those services. So it's really important to really understand the colleges that you're going to and seeing what they may have to offer.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive answer, Billy and Shawn. And if I could connect to it, a question that came in earlier, do any of the California Community College campuses use a tool called Swift Student to support appeals, or as one, I think, mechanism that students have to maybe trigger that professional judgment? Or is there, do you have any insights on what the appeals process looks like at the different campuses?
I don't use Swiss Student. I think every college has their own system of doing stuff. For my college specifically, we use Campus Logic with student forms, and that's a easy digital way for students just to go into their student portal and request for a professional judgment for anything. And it's completely digital. It's completely, it's fast, it's efficient. So that's the system we use, but I have not heard of that other one, but not to say other schools aren't using it.
Agreed. I haven't heard of Swift Student either, and Campus Logic, I think, is the predominant kind of industry standard for our system. But yeah, I would say that Shawn's right. You know, it could be a campus that's implementing the software into their own portals. But for students' sake, if you're advising a student, the financial aid office will have their professional judgment, special circumstance type of process made available to the student. Usually it's going to be on their website, but they can also go into the financial aid office if they feel more comfortable in doing so, and kind of going through that process there.
That sounds great. Thank you for that. And thank you for noting the tool, Campus Logic. That's helpful. One question that came in much earlier, and you talked a little bit about Cal Grant reform, but what would you like to see advocates in the legislature focus on in terms of supporting students at the community colleges, but also college affordability?
So I think they're actually doing a great job. It's not an easy realm, but I think complexity is one of the biggest issues that we run into. As you saw earlier, with 40 different financial aid programs that a student could be eligible for, and each one of those have subsets. For instance, without going too much into detail, Cal Grant has Cal Grant A, B, and C. Cal Grant A can go to students that have traditionally can't really go to community college students unless it goes to students that have dependents of their own, in which they provide most of the care for, or if they're a former foster student. So it gets a little bit complicated there. That's not to mention what can happen with Cal Grant B and C, with different thresholds and different, like if you go to a CSU, there's a 2% threshold, which can apply tuition and fees, but otherwise it doesn't. And I'm not really trying to be too informative here, just to show some of the complexities in just these programs themselves. What is being done with Cal Grant reform is really simplifying it into two different programs, Cal Grant 2 and Cal Grant 4. Now, it is going to include certain access awards, what they refer to them as, but grants that are tied to these programs that go directly to the students if they're your foster youth or former foster youth or current foster youth, or if they have a dependent of their own. But the idea is that getting rid of certain barrier requirements is really integral. Getting rid of that age requirement to be more equitable, getting rid of the GPA requirement to be more equitable, really increasing the award amounts for like Pell and Cal Grant to really look at the cost of attendance, the cost of education that's not just tied to tuition, fees, and books. We want to see what it costs to live, what it costs to eat, to have housing and support care and things of that nature. And the more that that's incorporated into the financial aid packaging, the better students will succeed. I mean, it's been shown pretty provenly and pretty understandably so that the more support a student receives financially, the more they're able to focus on their education and not have to worry about extra needs that they may have. So personally, I do think that the legislature is doing a good job. I do think it's a huge undertaking to take on, though, and that it's going to be something that they're going to do in pieces. But I think, as Shawn was mentioning, FAFSA Simplification Act, and really, if they can really get it down to 30-something questions, I think 36, 37, that's fantastic, because it is a challenge. And I really want to give a plug to Cash for College. If you need assistance with completing a financial aid application, or a student, or you want to volunteer yourself, that's a great program to go and volunteer for, or have students go to help them with that process, because it is a little bit complicated. And as I mentioned previously, it's been kind of pushed back with FAFSA simplification because it's not easy to do, and it may still have some complexities to it.
Thank you for that, Billy. And I would echo that plug for Cash for College as someone who's volunteered for it here in the Bay and LA. It's really a great opportunity to maximize this expertise and get these resources out to folks. We have just time for 1 or 2 questions left. I see one question that's popped in. If there's any other questions, please drop them now. One that came in: do students ever transfer from one community college to another? How often are students going to more than one campus to complete their studies? And I saw Shawn, you nod. Oh, go ahead, Billy.
Well, I can say for certain that it happens. I can't say to what degree it happens, but we do see quite a bit when you have to transfer financial aid programs. It can become a little bit complex, but usually the system's pretty good about allowing for that kind of transition. But from a personal standpoint, there's certain districts in which operate very similarly, or the colleges within that system operate very similarly. Let's take Los Rios in Sacramento, American River College, Folsom Lake College, CRC, Sac City. These colleges all kind of operate the same. And they have even some naming conventions that cross over from one college to the other. However, the financial aid offices don't always communicate with each other. So it's very important to list every single community college on your financial aid application that you may attend. And if you attend a different community college than you did the previous year, that's when it's important to follow up with different financial aid institutions. For instance, California Student Aid Commission. If you were a student who was awarded a Cal Grant B at American River College, and then they transferred over to Consumnes River College, but didn't update their portal, the California Student Aid Commission doesn't know to send that information over to Consumnes now. And so the student may be kind of in limbo trying to figure out where their award is, and their financial aid institutions may not know. So it's really important to follow up through all the different organizations and institutions. But Shawn, do you have a better idea of how often it happens?
I would say it happens a lot, especially with the community college system. And not even just transferring from one community college to another, but being simultaneously enrolled in multiple community colleges. And the California Chancellor's Office has done a great job of putting together what we call the California Virtual Campus, the CVC OEI, which allows community college students to be enrolled at, say, your school as a home school, and attend a teaching school online to take 2 online classes if for some reason their course that they need to graduate isn't specifically offered at your home school. So, I mean, it's not just the transfer students that we're seeing, but we're seeing dual enrollments at multiple schools, which are helping students to go ahead and complete their degree or certificate programs in a good amount of time. I mean, we don't want students, staying in the community college section for like 5 or 6 years. So the ability for them to be able to take their classes and get their degrees done as quickly as possible, it does happen. Keep in mind that financial aid is always housed at the student's home school, which is that student's choice, or whatever school they're primarily taking most of their classes at. A student can't get federal financial aid at 2 schools at one time. It's not allowed. However, with our community college system, if the student's receiving a California College Promise Grant at one school, they can get that same Promise Grant at the other school that they're enrolled in at the same time. So, I mean, the California system does a really good job of ensuring that our students have the resources and have the funding that they need to complete their degree program. It's one of the best systems I've seen, and I've worked in several different systems in a few different states. So California, hands down, has it covered with the CVC OEI.
That was such fantastic information, not just for that last question, but all of the questions. So last call, folks, to share your appreciation with John and Billy. If any other questions come in through the Padlet, I'll be sure to follow up with our fantastic presenters. But just note that if you have access to the Padlet and the resources that were dropped there. Billy and Shawn, thank you so much again for your time, talent, and treasure today. Do you have any closing comments before our Zoom master takes over?
Just thank you guys for having us.
Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you both. Thank you again to Shawn Domingo and Billy Wagner for reviewing financial aid packaging at the California Community Colleges. Let's give them one more round of applause in our chat. Let's make sure we show them our love. Thank you again.
We want to thank all of our incredible presenters from across 10 partners who shared their gifts of time, talent, and treasure with us over the last 4 weeks from February 23 through March 16, 2023. Whether you attended one session or more, please complete our exit ticket and let us know how we can enhance these sessions and this series for future years. Thank you to our generous partners for providing our wonderful gifts for our series raffle. You can win one of 5 prizes, like a backpack filled with goodies from our steering committee member, MoneyThink, a $100 athletic gift card, or a Gap Inc. swag bag. Don't forget to check out the rest of this YouTube playlist for more great content from our partners. Thank you again to our 10 partners from across the state of California: the University of California, the California State University, the California Community Colleges, the California Student Aid Commission, ScholarShare 529 and CalKids, AICCU, or the Association for Independent California Colleges and Universities, the California Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, and Decided Powered by MoneyThink. We also want to give special thanks to our connector sponsor, the College Futures Foundation, and to all of our generous sponsors. This free 4-week webinar series is brought to you by the Northern California College Promise Coalition, our members, our sponsors, our partners, and more. We invite you to share this series with your colleagues, students, and families across California. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.